There we go. We're in the great USA again. Lovely to see you. I don't think I've met any of you before. Tell me if I'm wrong, but it's good to see some new faces. I don't know whether you're all members of the network. If not, I'd encourage you to join, but good to see you anyway. In no particular order, but Imogen, you're top left on my screen. Would you like to introduce yourself and maybe indicate if there's any sort of areas you'd like to talk about this afternoon?
Yes, thanks. I have actually met you, Nigel, I think at a Norwich event on
Right.
a whole load of things, and you were one of the stalls, but I don't expect to remember.
I'm terrible with names and faces,
Yeah,
I'm afraid, so.
I wouldn't have expected you to remember. We had a good chat and I joined the network, and I'm part of a collection of projects called the Brex Fenedge and Rivers Landscape Scheme,
Right.
who are also part of the network as well.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed myself because I thought, it's interesting to keep up with what's happening. I haven't been to one of these before, so I don't really know the format. But so the most relevant projects, there's probably several, but in the BFER is the shorthand for that long-winded title I gave you, is one called Healing Waters, which I'm managing part of. The whole project has a whole range of outdoor activities. It's to do with encouraging and enabling people to do those outdoor activities, which we all know have all the benefits of green and blue space. So there's loads and loads of walks and yoga and mindfulness and loads of things. And there's information about that on the BFER website and their social media. They publicise them. The bit I'm doing is about outdoor swimming. And so we've been going now for 3 or 4 years, and I've done quite a number of introductory sessions. So it gives people the chance to have a go at outdoor swimming, especially if they've not really done it before and they're a bit nervous. And we have lifeguards and so on to give them that extra safety cover. But it is aimed to equip them to go and do it on their own or with friends, but without, all that supervision and so on, but to do it while swimming, if you like. So we give them safety info and talk about being responsible and that sort of thing. And they're a roaring success. They're absolutely wonderful. We've only really got 2 of those left to do this year. You might have people and you might be able to network about it because we want to recruit. The second one is on the 20th of August, and that's basic life-saving for children and young people. So we'll be publicising that a little later, because we want to promote safety and spread that message, and through young people is the key thing. And more urgently, if you like, is on the 2nd of July, we have a day of potential sessions for youth groups with their leaders and volunteers and so on. Booking for that hasn't gone so well. It's a bit complex for the groups to come along. They have to do all their own bureaucratic procedures, reasonably enough. But I'm hoping that if it isn't full, I'll open it out to what we normally do, which is either groups of adults or groups of children. But I was hoping to particularly reach youth groups. So if you have any, it doesn't matter where they come from, they don't have to be in the Brex, as long as they don't mind coming to Linford Water, which is not far from Thetford. It's a lovely lake with shallow, clean water. So if you know any youth groups of any sort whatsoever, it doesn't matter what they are, as long as they're willing to put their group together, if you like, to bring them, they can contact me. And so I'm happy to share email and links and anything you like afterwards. So yeah, that's it really. But I'm very interested in the broader range as well of looking at the benefits. I haven't said anything about that, but maybe that will come back to that. I think I'm sort of taking it as read that we probably know the benefits of green space and the benefits of blue space. And you can't get more blue than immersing yourself in the actual water. And anecdotally, and there is some evidence, but it's mostly anecdotal, people absolutely rave about the benefits. There's no question there are loads and loads of benefits, not for absolutely everybody, but a lot of people might not think they'd like it, but they do, and then they report benefits. So that's all I want to say for the moment. Thanks.
Thank you. I do remember you now, and the swimming connection is what jogged my memory. I guess people enjoy it once they get over the initial shock. Exactly.
And we're there to help them through that phase, so
yeah.
that they then go on and enjoy it on their own, which they do.
Yeah, good. I mean, just in terms of a quick response, you mentioned about youth groups and so on. Do you know about the youth advisory boards? Have you come across them at all?
Oh yes, I have. Do you know, I'm not sure how much I've approached them on this. I have a network of my own mailing list, but I haven't very actively approached them. That's a good point. Thanks.
Well, I have a connection there, a woman called Sam Mason who
Oh,
works for a company called MTM, and I think they work with that particularly the South Norfolk Youth Advisory Board on a whole range of projects. So I can certainly put you in touch with her if that would be helpful.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, we may come back and pick up on some of the points that you mentioned in a while as well. Nicola, would you like to go next?
Hi, yeah, lovely to hear about the benefits of all the blue space and green space and hear about the swimming. Yeah, that was really interesting. So I'm new to this too. I'm Nicola from Greening Windham, and we've just as a group fairly recently joined the Green Care Network, having been recommended to do so, having read the about you on your website. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of what kind of group we are, we're an environmental organisation. We've been running for about 5 or 6 years. We started off as a women's group with lots of different interests and found that lots of our people were interested in greening issues. So we started up a separate group and then invited men to join us. So we're very much a mix now and thriving due to that, I think. So we have a lot of members in Windham and we do lots of outdoor projects, but we also do climate action meetings, and we also try and liaise really hard with our local councils on all kinds of greening issues, but particularly those pertinent to the town. So in terms of outdoor stuff, our main project that we've had a lot of success with is setting up a community orchard, which was set up the autumn before last. And yeah, we've been planting apple trees, pear trees, but also a wide variety of plums, green gages, and cherry, I think, is included there too. So we've found with this project that a large number of people have come forward from the local community to take part in it. So it's been really interesting for us. It's not just our little group taking on a project. I'd say the majority of people were not originally part of Greening Windham, but they're now all on our website and sorry, on our mailing list. And sometimes there's overlap with some of our other activities. But the orchard itself is a regular meetup every other Saturday on a Saturday morning, 10 till 12. So it's only 2 hours. But we get an awful lot of work done. So we started off with a very derelict part of a local park called Browick Park, and there was a slope there which was just overgrown. There's been lots of builders' rubbish dumped on it and so on. The ground is very poor, and we've been gradually digging in or putting on, let's say, because we're into sort of no dig actually, loads of compost and mulch, and we have some very lovely arrangements with local people. So, for example, we've built some bays out of old pallets. We make our own compost, and we've now got local tree pruners dropping off their wood chips for us so we can let that rot down and use as a mulch. And yeah, going back to the people side of things, we found that all these people have come out from the local roads to the orchard, but actually from further afield as well, who've just heard about it through word of mouth. And we're now in a situation where we've got lots of young families coming with tiny little ones. And we've also got some teenagers, yay,
Fabulous.
who have come off their own bat, not as a group, but particularly. So we've got a few of them. Some of them are doing it through because they want to do Duke of Edinburgh, but some of them are actually using it as a career path. And we have found, this sort of intergenerational working thing has been fantastic. We can sort of boast that our youngest is 2 week old who came along with the teenage uncle and the rest of the family, but it's a teenage uncle who's really keen on learning about landscape management and trees and so on, and is training now to do that work. So this has been a stepping stone for him into the world of work and the training that he's now doing. So it's this sort of whole community ethos of people coming out, spending a couple of hours, camaraderie, community. We always invite people to, we even though we're there a short time, we invite people to come along midway to, see how the orchard's doing, have a cup of tea with us for those that aren't able to actually contribute. So that's our big project, I suppose. We also do lots of other stuff. We've planted wildflowers there. We've got a wildflower meadow going. We've got bulbs coming out. And another project that we do is Ketts Park Wood. So that's in conjunction with the Norwich Fringe project, who the town council have agreed to pay to supervise us with that, because that involves chainsaws and all sorts for woodland management to increase the biodiversity of the woodland there. Those are our main outdoor activities. And I did sort of touch on earlier that we do the other side of the coin as well, sort of liaison with politicians and holding meetings for the public. So that's us really.
Fascinating, and congratulations. It sounds like you've done a wonderful job so far, and brilliant opportunities for people. I mean, again, you've raised a number of points that I'd like to come back on in terms of connections, if you like, and things that we might be able to do for you through the network. But I'll leave that for the moment, and we'll hear from Gabriel perhaps, and then pull questions and comments together. Gabriel, welcome. Over to you.
Good afternoon. Hi everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm Gabriel. I work for an organisation called Active Norfolk. My colleague Charlotte kindly signposted me to this today. So our work is mainly looking at getting our Norfolk population physically active. Making it the norm for everyone to be engaging in regular activity. My work in Breckland is focusing on a number of key areas that we've kind of identified through a co-produced strategy and framework. So we look to work primarily with increasing children and young people's physical activity levels, particularly those in the greatest area of deprivation. We look at using physical activity as a way to support individuals with mental health needs and the kind of social isolation that we see quite commonly in the rural nature that we have in Breckland. And we also look to use physical activity as a measure to combat different long-term conditions, with a particular focus on individuals with health inequalities. So that's kind of a brief synopsis of what we do. And one of the big things that I think we might be able to contribute to this is that we recently, Sport England have recently developed a small grants program, which looks to bring communities together and provide sport and physical activity opportunities for groups of the population who are less likely to be physically active. There is a big component of this small grants fund that has a focus on environmental sustainability, with also there being a focus on areas of the greatest need, so areas of deprivation. The application process for that is quite short, so the applications will be due in by the 30th of June. So I'm looking for groups to work with about putting in an application. The grants are between £300 but up to 15k, so quite a large amount of money. So if there's any interest or any groups that you think might be interested, please do get in touch with me, and I'm more than happy to help support any application.
Lovely, thank you. I wonder whether Imogen, when you were aware of Active Norfolk and so on, given that Gabriel talks about Breckland, working in Breckland, is part of your patch, isn't it?
Yes, I am aware of them. I must admit I haven't, again, like with the YABs, I haven't directly contacted them about this our particular current activities, but you've prompted me. I've written it down. You've prompted me to, and also maybe I'm not sure about the grant because I think you have to be a group really, but there may be people who'd be interested in following up on that as well. So thank you for that. Yes.
Excellent. Perhaps I can come back with a few responses, if you like, or comments that might be helpful. I mean, I assume you all know who I am. I'm convener of the network, basically. And 3 years ago with a colleague, we founded the Green Care Network. We've got something like, I think, 300 members now, from a very wide variety of backgrounds and interests, some directly involved in projects like you've been talking about, but equally those that are involved perhaps in the NHS or in local authorities that have an interest in promoting nature connection for the benefits that it gives to health and well-being. But interestingly, I think perhaps as we're all finding over the last 2 or 3 years, we've become involved, and I suppose I in particular have helped to try and facilitate developments in what you might call other shades of green. So whilst health and well-being is one shade of green, if you like, one shade of the environment, conservation, nature recovery, managing the impact of climate change, food security, etc., are all other shades of green. And I think what we're saying is that by getting involved in one of those, you may well be benefiting some of the other shades of green. So if you're involved in active conservation work in the way that you've described, Nicola, as I think you've said, there's the well-being and health benefits that come from working with other people, the companionship, particularly in perhaps a sparsely populated rural area, and maybe if there's food involved, which there obviously is in an orchard, that can all help to contribute to food security as well. So there's all those various benefits, I think. I'd like to mention just a few things which may be, I suppose, more directly relevant or interest to some of you. A couple of weeks ago, a campaign called First Nature was launched. I don't know if you've heard of that, but basically it's a campaign across Norfolk to expand nature connection opportunities for children and young people up to the age of 25. And we've got, again, a whole range of organisations and projects involved in that. We're in the process of setting up a website with information on what's already happening out there. And so I was going to say to you, Nicola, in particular, and possibly also Imogen, if your project involves children and young people, we'd like to know about it, because we'd like to put it on a map and show that it's there and people can perhaps take advantage of it if that's appropriate. So that's one of the things we want to do. The other things that I think will be of relevance, particularly again to you, Nicola, I think, is we've facilitated something that's now called Norfolk Community Nature Forum. If you look on our website, I don't know whether you found it, but there is actually a page that used to be called Norfolk Wilding or Norfolk Community Wilding. We've actually just changed the name of the group to Community Nature. But there's a whole host of information on there with very useful links to projects, advice and information about nature recovery activities, improving biodiversity in various ways. And also a sort of composite table showing all the different tree and hedge planting schemes that are out there that you can take advantage of, free trees and hedge plants, etc., and other support. So if that's of interest, take a look at that. I suppose the other brief things I'll mention, which again I'm keen to promote, I suppose. We've got a register of members, which we will be circulating in a month or two, and we've been trying to get members who are happy to do this to share their contact details on that register. At the moment, at those 300, I think we've only got about 10% of people have come back to us and said, yeah, we're happy to share our email address or whatever it might be. The idea being that that register would be only accessible to members, and no sharing of that information would be done outside the membership. Again, to try and comply with GDPR constraints and regulations and so on. So if you haven't responded to that, we'd like to hear from you. I think there's another email going out soon to encourage people to sign up, if you like, or agree to sharing their details. You don't have to do it. Clearly, you may feel you want to stay private, which is absolutely fine. But we are a network, so the idea is to try and facilitate those connections with people that have got similar interests or perhaps can help each other, and so on. That's that. And the other thing I think, which I'll promote, is the Norfolk Green Care Festival, which again you may have picked up from previous emails and newsletters. Is running from Saturday the 22nd of July for the following 2 weeks. We have an opening event at the Plantation Garden in Norwich on the 22nd, 12 till 4. I think we've now got a dozen or so people with stalls wanting to come along to advertise their project or their organisation. But the whole idea of the festival is that if you want to put on an event, maybe to encourage wider interest, engage more volunteers, boost participation, whatever it might be, then we can promote that for you as part of the festival. Just give us the details, and we'll put it on we've got a web page that's starting to be populated with information on that festival. And our hope is obviously by the end of July, we'll have a large number of events taking place all over the county, which are primarily about promoting health and well-being through nature connection. But, as I've said before, there are other shades of green. So if there's other activities going on that's perhaps more to do with biodiversity or food security, whatever it is, we're open to publicising those as well. I think I shut up at that point. Yeah, come back to me, Nicola.
But just along those lines, I'm not sure if you're aware, it's a Great Big Green Week in June from the 10th to the 18th of June, and whether you felt that was something that in future you might want to incorporate it into that week to share within the national publicity, because there are some overlaps.
There are, absolutely, and we did think about it. I think it was last year. I think it was actually in the autumn last year, if I'm right. Yeah, and
they've changed it to a different time of the year, which is unfortunate actually, but yeah, it's in June this year.
Yeah, what we tried to do, I think, the last couple of years was to combine our annual meeting as a network with that Great Big Green Week, and make the meeting a more of a sort of workshop seminar type format, rather than just a business meeting, if you like, which we've got to do as an annual meeting, of course. But that's a good thought. I must admit I'd forgotten that they changed the dates.
Yeah, it's just, for a group like us, if we're concentrating on that week, we probably haven't got the energy to do it again the following month. So,
sure.
And although I think it's a great thing that you're doing, and the Plantation Garden is certainly a brilliant place to start it off in. But, I think with a volunteer group, we've got limited capacity, we're working as well. So it can be sometimes a bit tricky, but I think you've chosen a good time of the year for yours, because it's school holidays.
That was
and
part of the reason.
That's where this other one isn't so good.
Yeah, the swings and roundabouts, aren't there, really, on this? And we last year, I don't know if you remember or recall, but we had a wonderful launch event at the Bishop's Garden in Norwich, which was great because it raised us sort of £800–900, which has given us our money that we need this year to function as a network effectively. Unfortunately, they don't allow you to go back because they like to spread the benefits, if you like, of that open event. But having said that, that was a really great experience in terms of organising a launch event with refreshments and stalls and so on. It was a really great networking opportunity for all those that came along, I think. And I'm hoping that the Plantation event will be a similar opportunity to do that, really. Good. Any other Imogen could come back.
Yeah, just on those points you were just talking about there. I mean, we've got a slight issue in that Norfolk's an enormous county, and we're all based, or we're interested in the southern part of it. I mean, it's even more complicated when you've got the Brecks, because that goes into Suffolk as well.
Sure.
And the regions are very big. So if we're based way down in the south end, I mean, Norwich is not that inaccessible, of course, but yeah, so I find it makes, it's a completely pointless observation. I just thought I'd make it just to say that sometimes it's difficult to know where to spread yourself. And I'm sort of echoing Nicola, really, that, and volunteers as well. By the way, Volunteer Appreciation Week, or whatever they call it, Celebration Week, is the week, I think, 4th to the 10th of June, something like that. So, but the thing about volunteers is we all rely on volunteers. We probably are volunteers, and yeah, it can be a struggle to get enough people to do everything. And,
yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the geography is an issue, if you like, and you know, Norfolk is often accused of being Norwich centric, which I think it probably is. And we're trying to address that as best we can. It doesn't help that I live 10 miles north of Norwich, I suppose, but there we are. I do have a great not affinity, but I think appreciation of West Norfolk in particular, because my family is from that sort of area, so I have a sort of a family link there, and Great Yarmouth as well, and dare I say Thetford. I used to work in Thetford in when was it, the end of the 1990s, early noughties, when the Thetford Partnership was operating. I was the director of that and the Keystone Partnership that eventually developed out of it. So I know Thetford pretty well, and again, it's a place that I've got a great affection for. And the Brecks as well, wonderful area, very distinctive landscape, with great opportunities.
I mean, I make the point, it probably doesn't really get us anywhere, but I think it's good that you're doing these area gatherings, because that's us linking up locally, and I'm sure you've got more people in the southern area as well, just haven't been able to be here today because it's a weekday, isn't it? So I've got one other thing I wanted to say. Oh, sorry, go on. Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to quickly butt in and say I did actually listen to the last. I watched later the last one. Was it Norwich or North Norfolk?
Norwich and
Can't
Mid
remember.
Norfolk, yes.
Norwich, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was great actually. So although I live in Wymondham, I was still very interested in what's happening in the other areas, because you can still learn a lot about
Absolutely.
people's ideas. Sorry, Imogen, you
I
carry
think
on.
just to say I think one of the benefits of recording and making the recordings available, which we found, you know, that, you know, I've shared with my fellows on the support team, you know, is it worth carrying on because there's only small numbers here, etc. But they've come back to me quite rightly and said, well, look, if it works with small numbers, then that's great, because I think it does work when you've got a small number of people, more chance to talk, more chance to explore things perhaps in depth. But also, as we've just said, if it's recorded, it's available to everyone. And okay, they can't participate in the meeting, but they can pick up, if you like, useful information and contacts as a result of looking at those perhaps as well.
And another unhelpful thing, before I say the other thing I want to say, which is just, do you happen to know if you've got anything equivalent in Suffolk? Because with the Brecks, I'm dealing with both areas. So if you don't know if it is.
I don't believe so. I mean, I don't pretend to have, you know, complete knowledge of these things. I mean, the only organisation I suppose that I would say is sort of like that is Wild East. Have you come across Wild East?
Vaguely.
Yeah, I mean, they're an East Anglian outfit that essentially are about promoting nature recovery or biodiversity improvement in various ways, and they're very supportive of some of the things I've mentioned, like the Community Nature Forum and First Nature. Been very much involved in those with us as well, so we connect with them. I mean, the other thing to say is that we're very flexible, our boundaries. I mean, we talk about us being Norfolk, but we've got members who are, you know, within 30 miles in Suffolk or in Lincolnshire or Cambridgeshire. So, you know, we're not too bothered about people being a bit further spread. If this is of use to them, you know, let's include them.
That's brilliant. And it might be that other counties or, you know, organisations set up something using this model, perhaps.
Yeah, there is one. I would say there is one that is focused very much on. Well, I say very much. I think tends to be focused on gardening, so horticultural therapy in particular, down in Surrey. I don't know if you've heard of Thrive. Thrive is the national body that sort of promotes and trains people in therapeutic horticulture, and they're based down in Surrey. In fact, sorry, Reading, just outside Reading, I think it is. That's right. And there is now a network equivalent to this Green Care network that's operating in their vicinity, but I think it's a smaller outfit, and it tends to be focused much more on those sort of community gardening type projects.
So the actually quite connected thing I wanted to mention that sort of brings some of this together, because you talk about connectedness, and one of the things our project is looking at is access, although we're not looking at it as widely as we should, but and also in another other field I'm interested. So it's to do with access so that people can get to the nature place. Now, obviously, we've got an orchard in the town, you know, that's going to be accessible, or you've got things to do to make it accessible. So access can mean access from all parts of the community, which I know this network and members of it are obviously very, you know, you've talked about young people, there's disabled people and so on. So, so I know that's something you're already focused on. So the people that get the access, which groups and which communities, as I say, you're already onto that. The other aspect of access, and it's particularly, well, it's not particularly, but it is very sharply focused when it comes to outdoor swimming, but it's also true for walking and other activities, is where are you allowed to go? I mean, you're allowed to go to quite a few places when you walk, but far from enough. And there's all sorts of problems and so on. So that's one area. When it comes to outdoor swimming, if you think of the problems you have, if you want to go and walk somewhere, if you just like to multiply them by about 10, you've got the difficulties we have, and they're so complicated. There's people don't want you in a place, but there's also legal complex. I'm not going to go into it, but just list them. And then there's an awful lot of misunderstandings and fears. People have a lot of fears about safety, pollution, and landowners have fears about liability, all of which are pretty misplaced, but they're there. So so I sort of just wanted to mention it really, that we've got all these, we kind of know there's benefits to all these things. We know we want to get everybody involved that can benefit, and all different groups, but we sometimes have difficulty getting access to the places. And I don't know what we can do about it, but I do think it's an important one to bear in mind.
Well, I mean, if I can comment on that, there are three things which I think are promising in that regard. Access in the sense of visiting specific or special places. It's certainly come up as a discussion point in the First Nature campaign about children and young people, particularly with regard to schools and their ability to arrange and fund visits to, say, a conservation area or a nature reserve or whatever. And just an example of that, my local primary school in Corston recently organised a coach trip to Corston Heath, which is literally probably 2 miles from the school. It cost them £300 to hire a coach to get a class of children there. So there is that financial disincentive. But what was interesting in the discussion that we started to have about this was that it's much more than that. It's about all the red tape that goes with organising that sort of trip, the health and safety, risk assessment, and obviously having the staff available to accompany children or maybe volunteers to do that. So all I would say is that is an issue that we are exploring through the First Nature campaign, a way in which we might be able to assist schools, whether that involves you know, getting funding together in order to make it financially easier for them to do that, or it's maybe finding a sort of a standard approach to some of the risk assessments and so on that might streamline the whole thing for them as well. That's the first point. I think the second point, which is in a sense the flip side of that, is about what I would call doorstep nature. And again, we had a very interesting discussion about this at another meeting yesterday, and basically saying that whilst we want to encourage people to, you know, travel to special places, perhaps to see and experience special things, we ought to be focusing very much on what's on the doorstep. And you know, it can be even in a built-up area, something as simple as, you know, going to the park or looking in your back garden or whatever, or as a community orchard. You know, there's all those little local projects that we ought to be emphasising and promoting as well. So you know, that's another thing that I think is coming through. The meeting I referred to was about a new project that looks as though it's going to be developed through the health service locally, called Nature Prescriptions.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know if you heard about that, but this is an RSPB-led initiative, and there appears to be financial and other support from the health service locally to developing a version of this to enable people that perhaps would benefit particularly from connecting with nature to be given a sort of I guess, a guide really to what they might do, what they might observe, what they might visit in order to get those benefits, to benefit their mental and physical health. So that's coming along, which is very promising. I think the other thing you say, Imogen, about difficulty of accessing the countryside, if you like, is absolutely spot on. I know that from our own experience. We have public footbaths in our local area, but they very often don't go anywhere, if you understand me. They're historic. They were about accessing buildings or places that were important in the past that no longer exist. And there is a whole issue about improving that network, improving that accessibility to the countryside. And that's something which I gather that the new government incentives on farming, payments through the Environmental Land Management Scheme, as it's called, ELMS, is actually going to promote with farmers and landowners, actually give them a financial incentive to put in permissive paths, which can help to join up, if you like, some of the others that exist there and make the countryside more accessible. And that's certainly something that I'm keen to explore, both in terms of my local area, but also as part of this approach to community-led nature recovery, you know, accessing nature as well as improving biodiversity. I think is an important element of that, which we are very conscious of.
Yeah, I think this connectivity thing is so important. I think for too many years, we've thought of nature as being a place to go to and not recognize that actually we are living within nature. So we don't go to a nature reserve to see nature. We live within nature, and we have just built over it and developed it and so on. But it's out there, it's outside our back doors. It's connecting where we are with other places. So if you're going to go to a nature reserve, you know, you should be able to just walk there, cycle there, whatever. But on the way, you're still actually in nature. You don't get into nature when you get to the nature reserve. And this is so important. And it's such the crux of the whole philosophy that is, I think, what we need to be really having in the front of our minds all the time, that we are part of nature. I feel very strongly about that. And I think this connectivity in terms of connecting people with nature, as well as connecting people with being within nature, if that makes sense, is just crucial to the whole thing. And just on a kind of just in terms of what we do at the orchard, one of the things we've found is, in terms of connections, is that people have come to the orchard who are neighbours. They live in the same road. They have never met, never seen each other. And now they're meeting up, and they're meeting up outside the orchard as well. So they've created new networks and new friends. And that's all about, you know, social inclusion, isn't it?
Yeah, totally agree with what you say about connecting. Are you familiar with the work that University of Derby have done on the nature of nature connection? You might.
Yeah, I have had a look at that, actually.
Have you seen that? There's about 5 or 6 different dimensions. They talk about creative connections. They talk about the wonder of nature. So it's really getting to the heart of what that connection is about. It's not just being out in the countryside. It's about thinking and behaving in a way that really realizes real benefits, if you like, for you in terms of your mental and physical health, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's all absolutely right. And to be able to walk or get to places in nature and enjoy it on your doorstep is absolutely crucial. And I think it's something, we definitely have to push for in our own different ways, whatever they might be, through projects, through connectedness, and all that. I think it's important to realise, though, or rather, I'd like to say that unfortunately, it's harder to achieve when it comes to getting access to get into water, or onto it for that matter, in a valley. You know, and we can't solve all those problems. And I think it's worth being aware of them, that some benefits that people get from water are perhaps additional, extra, or different, or, you know, suit different people. And for all sorts of reasons, they're good, but they're much more difficult to get. And people in the swimming community are very conscious of reducing their travel. That's happened in the last couple of years, quite starkly, really. There was lockdown, and then there was petrol, but actually it's green in awareness. And so people don't really want to have to drive from here to there to get to a place that they're allowed to go. So we really need to open up more access where it's appropriate. Obviously, you've got to be responsible about all this. And same with taking, you know, loads and loads of people to a place. You wouldn't take them and trample into a little tiny place. The same, you wouldn't encourage, you know, dozens and dozens or hundreds of people to go to a sensitive place. But one of the problems we have with access and swimming is that people do flock to a few places and they have to travel to them and park and so on, which does cause problems with overcrowding, erosion, parking, all of that. But it's not really those people's fault, if you like. It might be some of them, but it's mostly not their fault. It's because they haven't got a place, you know, in the past, and to an extent still, little villages would have their own little water hole. And you know, I don't know whether Wyndham's little tiny river has, but you know, for example, there's a village in Suffolk. It's irrelevant to us here, but it's in Suffolk. It's called, well, let's take a Norfolk one, Barbara, for example. There's a bit of water that people traditionally have always gone to and still do, and you know, from reasonable distance. And it's a bit harder to achieve, but I think it's as important. But and I think it's important not just so those people can get those benefits, but I think you already kind of alluded to this, is that people who get the chance to immerse in whatever way and get engaged with nature, I think there's plenty of surveys have shown that they're much more likely to care about it and actually to get involved in actively caring for it in a number of different ways. So I think we know that. And yeah, so one of the there's lots of barriers to people doing that, and we can tackle them in all different ways. And some of them are harder to tackle than others, aren't they? I mean, things like the limitations in the Crow open access land is really, and you know, footpaths, as you mentioned, and that's another limit, because they're often, especially in our region, the other part, in the north of the country, you've got loads of moors to go and walk on, but in this part, you've got a little place that used to be the common where people took their sheep or whatever it was.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can't get to it because there's no path to it, you know. And
Yeah.
Then what you may or may not realise is, even if you've got a lovely bit of common land or something you can get to, and it's got some water beside it, a river or whatever, technically, under that access legislation, you're not allowed to get in that water, which is absolutely insane. And hopefully that will change. But
am I right? I think I've read somewhere, Imogen, that there's something like 90% of waterways are privately owned. Is that right?
There's a real mess with statistics. I mean, it's a very large, yeah, it's not quite that, it's more complicated, but it is a large proportion of rivers that you can't easily get into without contention, either to travel up and down them, say in a canoe or something, but perhaps more importantly even is to even get to them, because of the complexities of legal access to get to water is much harder than footpaths. But yeah, no, statistics are not entirely straightforward on it, but yes, the general picture that we don't anyway. I don't mean to just moan and rant here. I just thought it's important to include that angle in what we're thinking about, and I really, you know, did want to not focus negatively, but focus on the positive ways of doing that. So chiming in with what you've both said, and I'll be interested to hear if Gabriel's got some more thoughts on that as well, because if you're encouraging people to go out and be active, you know, how does that work? Does that work in terms of going to a special place, or I'm sure you're encouraging people to cycle and walk locally as well. So yeah, so thinking about all that stuff as we work towards the access.
Do you want to come in on that, Gabriel?
Yeah, I completely agree. I'll just give you an example in Thetford that really frustrates me personally. We've got one of the most deprived areas in Norfolk, in the Abbey estate, in an area that is you've got access to water within 100 meters of the estate, and it's in quite a close proximity to the Thetford Forest. Yet, with some of the work that we do with the children, they've never accessed either of those wonderful assets that we have. On a professional and personal level, that's just, I find that really, really, really sad. And yeah, even if it is within walking distance, whether we, from my perspective, obviously getting them physically active to be active, but just accessing these wonderful green spaces and the kind of plethora of benefits that people can engage is quite heartbreaking, to be quite honest. So yeah, a lot of the work we're trying to do is trying to break down those barriers and yeah, I think it's going to take quite a lot of work to get there. But yeah, more than happy to kind of pick up a conversation with anyone if they've got any ideas how we can kind of achieve this, if that makes sense.
I'd love to come back in on that Thetford example, because I know exactly where you're talking about. And I'm running another project, which is looking at the history of recreation. Well, yeah, all recreation in the rivers in the area as well. And we talked to loads of people and gathered photos and so on. There's a wonderful photo from 1975 of it's a long, thin photo that the local paper did, which has got hundreds of people in exactly where you're talking about, the river #1 Staunch, which is just down next to the Abbey Estate. So the river next to the Abbey Estate used to be, and to an extent is popular, but what happened in 1971 or something is that the council made this little terrace on the edge of the water, and they also made a little paddling area separated from the main river, so the children could paddle, their parents, you could play on the terrace, everybody could sit there and have a lovely time. And people did come from that estate, which was relatively new in the 70s. And it was fantastic. But people now say, well, look at the state of it now. I mean, they say things like, for example, they got loads of geese on it and they poo all over the place, which is true. There are probably too many geese pooing on it. But, you know, I mean, it's interesting because that ought to be, I mean, there's a weir as well. So you'd have to sort of give people advice to keep out of the weir sort of thing. But it would be not terribly difficult, really, to do something to make that particular bit of river accessible again. At the moment, what you've got, I mean, it's not just duck poo, it's also boards that are all fractured and broken and splintered and, you know, and all that. So I don't want to go on about the example, but it's actually a very good example to show how, I don't know how you get it to happen, but it might be possible to, without very much difficulty. But then you get all these fears that come in about rivers. But I mean, I'm sure we could help tackle that. In terms of getting into the forest, it's not ideal there, is it? Because you can get into a bit of it, but then you come up against the A11 road and the railway line. So you've only got a little packet, but you know, hopefully you could get them in there. But isn't that an interesting example, which is not much help to the others who might not know it well? But yeah, how can we do it? Gabriel, we'll have to have a plan and see how we can work on that one. And there are probably no doubt many examples like that where the barriers shouldn't be so much. I mean, the physical barriers, I suppose, I mean, to start with, the physical barriers shouldn't be too difficult to tackle. The understanding issues by parents, authorities, and that sort of thing shouldn't be too difficult to, but it is a bit difficult. I'm sure you've explored all this a bit more. What are all the other barriers? They've never done it, so it's a bit scary. There's a lot of myths about how difficult and scary it is, and you might fall in the river and die and all that. But there must be ways, you know, and forests are interesting because there's so much mythology that people have, you know, babes in the wood, you're going to, you know, all sorts of awful things are going to happen to you if you go into a forest. And yeah, it just, yeah, I'm with you on that. let's
be something that the town council will be interested in. And knowing again from my own working there a few years ago, they were quite active and, you know, probably a good place to start rather than Brecon Council in some respects, because they're obviously focused on the town. And I'm sure, you know, part and parcel of the efforts being made to continue to regenerate the town, and certainly the Abbey Estate and one or two other areas that I remember fondly, where, you know, we were trying to do similar sorts of things back in the late 90s, early noughties. Gosh, 20 years ago. There you go.
I mean, there's definitely goodwill from Thetford Town Council. They're very keen. I don't think Breckland Council lacks that goodwill either. Sure. I think there's complications who owns which bit in Thetford.
Exactly. Yeah.
They've started to work it out in various places, but it takes a lot of work and trying to get to know people, and with councils they're always changing the personnel and so on. So, but these things are not impossible, are they? But they.
Oh, that's right.
I mean, I suppose they need to make a focus on it, to get some people together who can tackle the different aspects and the different barriers and the different ways to approach the families on the estate and so on.
Exactly, yeah. It's a collaborative approach again, isn't it? And, you know, maybe you and Gabriel are the starting point for that, to have a conversation afterwards. Gabriel, I wonder if you could also just, picking up on what you were saying about the Sport England grants, and just say a little bit more about those, because again, thinking of the wider audience for this, that might be of interest to some people. I was particularly interested in what you said. Even though it's Sport England, they're not necessarily just going to be funding sport. They're going to be funding other forms of physical activity. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. There's kind of a big, from my understanding from Sport England, there's a big push to kind of switch from thinking sport is sport towards physical activities. So just getting people moving, not necessarily in kind of team based activities,
Yeah.
but for example, yeah, getting people on the rivers, kayaking, doing untraditional kind of sports that they might not be able to have traditionally accessed in the past, not kind of other things other than football, rugby, cricket, and so on.
Yep. Yep.
So there is kind of a big push for as many kind of different activities as possible to get people moving and get people active.
So that could include
yeah,
things like, I mean, could it include community gardening projects or conservation work, for example, or is that acceptable?
So Sport England are a bit funny about gardening, much to my frustration. So we had a fund called the Together Fund where we wanted to fund a few gardening projects, which we unfortunately weren't able to because they didn't consider that as physical activity. But we did, as an organisation, we did manage to get around that by including an active travel element. So there is opportunities for it, and yeah, it's a bit of a frustrating one, but in the gardening aspect, but hopefully they'll change their mind on that.
Having been weeding for 2 hours at Blickling Hall this morning, I can tell you that it is a very physical activity.
I couldn't agree more. That's why it's quite surprising that it's not included.
Yeah. I suppose it's not all weeding. That's the thing, isn't it? It's sowing seeds and things like that, which is not quite as physically demanding, perhaps. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're coming up towards 5. Is there anything else anyone wants to pick up on before we close? Nicola.
Yeah, I don't know if this is relevant to anyone really, but we've just received a news release from Norfolk County Council about doing a consultation on green spaces. So I thought that could be relevant to the Green Care Network. You may be aware of this, Nigel, already. So this is consultation on green spaces in Greater Norwich. We've just received it today,
Right.
as I say. So so just to read it very briefly, a fresh approach to managing and improving existing green spaces to make sure they benefit as many people as possible with a focus on inclusive access, a strategy for creating new green spaces in the area that will benefit people and nature. So this is what they call Greater Norwich. I'm not quite sure how far that extends, but I think I know it does include Wyndham.
Yeah,
so
it's basically Norwich City Council plus Broadland and South Norfolk Council areas.
Yeah,
the
so it's quite a big area.
Greater Norwich Growth Board, I think, is the body that sort of oversees.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So they're looking for this consultation results of people to be included in it up until the 12th, from today till the 21st of June, to give people a chance to tell us how and why they're using existing green spaces and how they think these areas can be improved. So that is an opportunity at least for people to have their say.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's that whole area of what's called green infrastructure, isn't it? And they're thinking, I think, where do they invest their money in the future? Not just in terms of where a lot of the growth is going around Norwich, but perhaps in other areas as well. I don't know. Yeah, thank you for that. That's helpful.
You're welcome.
Okay. I suppose it really just remains for me to say, are you happy for me to share your emails with each other in a follow-up? That looks like a nod. And obviously, if you want to, pick up on anything as we've discussed today, then obviously feel free to do that. And the other question really is about, do we do this again? I mean, I have to say, I think without exception, the other areas have said yes, and probably 2 or 3 months' time or something like that. Does that sound like it would be worth doing again? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll do that, and I'll perhaps pencil in a date. Where are we now? May, June, July, perhaps end of July or something like that, or perhaps September. Let's avoid August, perhaps go for early September, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Well, unless there's anything else anyone wants to raise, thank you very much for your contributions, which have been very interesting. As I say, small group, but it's amazing, the depth you can get into and the issues you cover, really. Just to repeat what I said, if you've got something you want to do for the festival, end of July, early August, we'd love to hear from you. Just email me. Likewise, certainly you, Nicola, I think your Wyndham project deserves a profile on the website. So if you take a look at the website, you'll see under various categories of project, just a 2 or 3 paragraphs description with perhaps a photograph, contact details, any logos or whatever. If you'd like to put something on there, just send it through to me and we can slot you in and put you on the map.
Thank you, Nigel.
Yeah.
And thank you for setting up the meeting as well. Really useful. Thank you.
Pleasure. Good.
Thanks. Very enjoyable. Thank you.
Good. Nice to see you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Be in touch.
Okay. Bye.
Bye now.